Welcome back, everybody, to Titans of Today, episode 31. We have Giulio Ranucci. He's the head of innovation and corporate venture capital with Rome Airport's ADR S.p.A. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for the invite, Jacob.
Most definitely. Now, you're out in Rome. Yes, we're living out in Rome. What I really want to focus on today, and I think the real value, what I enjoyed from our initial conversation, among other things, was the success that you and your team have achieved in corporate venture capital. Because for a lot of founders, a lot of even investors, and really just people all over the world, corporate VC is not as well known, not as often talked about, and sometimes it's a difficult thing to get right. Usually when organizations get large, they struggle to innovate and create new products or even bring in different innovations that continue to drive them forward. But you guys have proven out a model that's done that successfully. So talk about when you started with Rome Airports and your journey to the success that you guys have had today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. I think I fully agree in terms of not being well known and established the corporate venture capital firms and activities throughout the companies in general. ADR being in the aviation infrastructure industry, being in charge of building and managing 2 airports of Rome, and even being part of a whole team that manages even more airports. At the time I joined the company, which it's 5.5 years now, I came from the state-owned finance bank, which is called CDP, which is basically one of the state bank that actually started after World War II to rebuild the company and the overall economy of the state. There are different ones even in Germany, in France, and what else. So the aim there was, from my point of view, to move from the strictly financial business for the startups to actually engage them with the true business needs that actually will be the fuel of the tomorrow startups to actually have a unique and stable business model to allow them to actually grow outside of the public money. Throughout the company, we actually developed and managed an innovation model that started with a clear reason why being a smart city as an airport 2025, which obviously has to be reliable and very well managed. And Rome, it's the second 5-star airport, which all over the world are just 11. And for the 8 times in a row was awarded as best airport in Europe. So you have to have a pretty well managed place to actually do those POC and tests. But along with that, we actually developed and deployed an innovation hub inside the physical airport. So not just to take a spare room, put some laptop in and say, oh yeah, that's my innovation hub, right? Instead, having something to be developed inside the business. And for the startup, so the reach out that we have throughout the calls that we have a couple of times a year is not just to have a mentoring from the innovation team, but to actually have the engagement throughout the business. So we defined a group of people that we call the innovation cabin crew, which comes from all the companies of the group, and they actually define all the requirements and the issue that we have throughout the business to then engage those startups. Just to give you a couple of KPIs, we do engage roughly 500 to 600 startups each year, and then we accelerate 10, 15 of them. And obviously, we are able to reduce the risk when we invest, because we don't invest just on a pitch deck, but we do work with them for 6 to 8 months. We know the team, we know the reliability, we know the technology, we get the leverage of the testing. So we see the solution in place, we see the KPIs, and obviously being the mentor, a senior manager of the vertical, that could be cleaning, solar panels, energy, mobility. And that's the lucky side of being able to experiment inside an airport, which once again, it is a smart city, very, very horizontal in terms of technology. In that sense, then we can actually reduce this risk and we double win, right? Because we have a very unique and quality-driven solution in terms of startup, but at the same time, we even get a bit of equity of the company, which we believe it will become a de facto standard for the overall industry. So basically, we have a potential return on the investment, even on the scalability of this solution on other players, airports, but even other infrastructure as a whole. So malls and stuff. So that's the overall model around it.
So I think there's 3 or 4 points of brilliance there that I identify, which listeners can utilize or begin to think about how they can apply these things to their business or in their firm. The first is the framing of airport as smart city, as you say. Because if you just see airport as your average run-of-the-mill thing, and airports are all over the place. You're missing the perspective and the foundation and the frame that you guys have that allows you to take in and look at all these types of different technologies that are emerging, from artificial intelligence to different forms of security measures to all the other host of innovations and technologies, from even data processing and things like that, that directly influence your everyday customers and everyday users' lives. I would say that's the first thing. Where did that originate from, that framing and that context?
It's been such an hype talking about smart city, especially in Italy. It all started during the Expo, if you remember, in Milan, which was 2015. We always engage on those events talking about, we're going to build a smart city fully connected. Everyone could pay with their own mobile. So we get all those data. We do a data-driven approach in this sense. But airports are a de facto smart city as a whole. So you basically have an average wait time of people inside an infrastructure spanning from an hour to 2 hours and a half. Obviously, depending if it's a European flight, an intercontinental flight, so they did the security control and such. So you have people engaged there that they don't want to move. You cover all the connectivity. You can actually define all the visual experience around their time. And at the same time, you can track even all the movement. So the engagement throughout the beacon sensors, LiDARs, or cameras, you can actually engage them much more on have your value time inside the infrastructure. So that's why airports are slowly moving much more non-aviation incomes, which usually and historically was the main point and the balance sheet of any single airport. Now they are moving much more on the shopping mall. So if you get the chance to see Asia in Singapore, they are basically an open mall that is even open to people that don't even have a boarding pass. That's why we actually moved to this concept, because we know that the technology and the flexibility around the testing that you can have inside an airport is truly the one that you can actually have in terms of being the landlord, but at the same time being the one in charge of the experience for the next couple of hours. Going back to an example, autonomous mobility, we do believe that the perfect fit of doing the first testing, it's on an environment that it's fully controlled with a shuttle bus doing the same route. And in those places, you can actually test those, right? It's a bit of an utopia in saying, yeah, you should test autonomous driving in the city center of Rome. We all know that it's something that is going to come in the next 20, 30. So you should focus on the cases that are much more reliable and much more standardized. So airports are actually a huge leverage in this sense. And that's why the experience that we built in Rome is becoming the benchmark for the industry. I don't want to bother you with prices and all the awards and the stuff, but I think that matching the infrastructure and the place with the needs of the startup. So having a startup-driven program that matches very well managed infrastructure, that's the perfect fit on saying, okay, what's the reasons why from the side. So from the startup point of view, to have a really reliable and good stress test on having a real world test on an infrastructure that sees 150,000 passengers each day. So whoever has an autonomous robot or a technology of tracking people, obviously they want to test in an environment that they can guarantee them much more flexibility and a real stress test when it comes to backs from the company. Because as I was saying, a startup needs and wants more than anything else to be a door opener to additional businesses and to have the perfect fit on business needs, much more than just have the 50K, 100K, 200K, 300K. They want to know what challenges companies have and how they can address them throughout the technology that they propose. That's the main topic, basically.
Sure. And that actually leads right into that second piece, is after having the correct framing and seeing that you can apply all these different leading technologies into this airport as smart city, setting up the innovation hub within the airport is getting those startups directly in the face of the customers. They're seeing the traffic, they're seeing how people move from one way to the next, and their technology immediately accesses real world firsthand data that's not even a data set. It is, I can see it with my eyes going on over there, and then I actually have the data set coming in backing my product.
Exactly. Especially if you think about that, we test on cultures, languages, and complexity that inside an international hub, it's there. So you have a wide spectrum of, they get scared of the robot, they get selfies out of it, the kids play it and they push the stop button. So you want to, all those kind of feedbacks on the real world, once again, is not to have a hub inside a room that you have it. So you say, oh, you go on LinkedIn and you say, oh yeah, I have my brand new innovation hub. Yeah, you do the pictures and stuff, but you want to have the main stakeholders of this technology interacting with those services. So just to give you a couple of example, now it's been more than a year and a half that we have in place an autonomous delivery robot for food and beverage. Also, you can have, you go on a website while you are sitting on a gate. You don't want to do the lineup for your Coke or whatever drink or whatever food, and the robot just brings it there, right? But even on the autonomous for PRM, so people with reduced mobility, we actually started a fully automated service throughout the Japanese company. And obviously for them, it's a unique experience, not only as a value case and business case, because obviously we don't want to have people getting hurt by pushing chairs all their life. So to have a better experience and to enhance the way we actually provide those services with an autonomous vehicle that can actually enhance this experience to passengers. So those are the reasons why that actually sits on the fact, once again, that the value of the direct feedback, especially during the POC, which we call the POC, in reality, it's the very first step to the rollout. Because once again, we don't want to be and become a POC factory, because we don't want to count the testing case. We want to count the full rollout of those services. Accepting risks, but as in today, we were lucky enough and good enough to actually have roughly 50% of the tests to actually become full rollout services inside the airport. And I think that's the real and only KPI that we should measure. What's the impact on the business of those tests? Because if innovation is just a theater on the latest tech and latest nerdy thing, I think it's going to just be a marketing side, right? Just a marketing asset of your company, which it's a shame that we can actually have instead a true testing ground to showcase technology that can actually point to the airport of the future, which we are building every single day, not only with the startups, but even with the right mindset when it comes to starting from the business needs.
Points 3 and 4 that you mentioned there, just to recap, the core access to that quality data, firsthand data, and seeing things through the customer's eyes. There was another thing that you mentioned there about when you saw an example of success in China. You said that would work for us, especially if you're thinking about Rome, Milan, those types of areas. Shopping, high quality goods, people are going to want to buy things, bring them home, and things like that. So modeling success was also a step that you all took, wherever you could find it.
Yeah, because I truly embrace the quote that you have to be concrete, but even you have to look around and see whoever is much ahead of you in terms of policies, in terms of approach, especially when it comes to hardware, robotics, and autonomous, which is the most difficult one. We all know that in Europe to manufacture robots, the scalability is not there. So usually we do have to approach companies that are already testing or being in a service in places where the regulation is very different. Why? Because we have to look around and all the potential of those solutions. Because once again, innovation sits on the rollout of the service, the insurance, the legal requirements, much more than just bring the single robot and say, oh, look how fancy it is. I can clean washroom with this machine. But then it's not compliance. You never talk to unions. You know what I mean? You just showcase something that will never become a reality in terms of a service. So I think that 80% of our job in terms of innovation team, it's a matter of compliance and stick with the business needs, much more than just saying, oh, let's showcase something, let's take pictures of things. Because I think that even on the side of the overall company, you will be seen as a team that does a bit of showcase of a solution instead of changing the way I work daily. So that's why it's important that from the very beginning, we select those cases and those startups with the business mentors, because looking around worldwide, you're going to see lots of solutions, but in majority, they are never actually being tested with real passengers, which is the main challenge. If you think about this company that we rolled out in terms of autonomous service for PRM, they went through 35 tests around the globe, so roughly 22 airports, so for 4 years. the first time they actually tested with passengers, so real passengers, so no employees of the company that did their contract and stuff, was in Rome, because since the very beginning we said we don't care about having people on it, like employees and stuff. We have to move to a fully automated service for the passengers. And that's once again the reason why, and the main point of having an innovation inside the business, because it's halfway between the corporate and the actual business, which in our case is the infrastructure. But it's important that in this sense, even the approach to the project is not really with the company standard way of doing a project, because 6 months, 8 months for a big corporate is not really a long time. It's considered pretty quick. For a startup to a year dedicated to a company, it's a huge investment. So you have to match in terms of timing to be delivery driven in terms of, okay, we are doing this in this month, then we do it then the next month, because the value of time for both our side is something that we have to define on the very first steps, because we don't want to waste time in having something that will never be a solution for the passengers at the end.
And one of the ways that you handle that and make sure of it, as you've mentioned, is these perfect smaller scale tests. So the thing is, we love hearing about the big projects where people come and we're going to spend $1 trillion and we're going to make, you said, the amazing smart city. It's going to have everything. And then they start building it, but they don't do any testing, or they're hoping that it'll all come together exactly as they saw it. And that leads into a lot of challenges. It's good for headlines. It's good for marketing. But in the real world, especially for that startup dealing with their resources, their time, their focus, their attention, they need the smaller scale that you guys are providing.
Yeah, I'm going to give you an example, which was one of the first projects that I actually joined when I got to Rome Airport a couple of weeks. So there was this huge meeting regarding the chatbot, like the assistance for passengers. And obviously, in the corporate way of doing those projects standard, every single student starts saying, okay, I want to have boarding pass scan. I want to have maps. I'm going to have flights. I'm going to have everything. This software became a monologue of 1 to 2 million euros. So no one wanted to go to the board and say, oh, we have to spend those amount of money, because that's going to be like a huge thing. Then it's going to deliver every single answer. So the approach that we introduced, the innovation team was actually introduced in terms of business, was let's start from what the passenger actually asks. So 96% of people, they just want to have info on the flights. So let's get a startup that with 20K, they're going to deliver a chatbot only on info flights. At the end, we actually spend, 100 times less to have something that from 1 to 5 had a 4.8 rating in terms of scoring from the passengers. So once again, wow. The approach from corporates is obviously to have everyone to say, oh, let's add things. But the real reason why is, and the real value is to say no than to say yes. Because to say yes, it's obviously easy, like when the iPhone was introduced, oh no, it's fully touch. Okay, but we need all the keyboards. But it's much more difficult to say no to things than to say yes and adding dozens of features. And that's the thing. Once you actually test that, you can be flexible, you can be quick in actually deliver it. Obviously, you can fail. The company, it can even be that during the test is not reliable enough. The solution doesn't work. It's not compliance in terms of software, like stability and stuff. But that's why we need, let's say, the program, because testing, it's the way to go to then move to a full rollout, which inside an airport, it's even much more difficult, because obviously you have to take into consideration the cybersecurity issues and all the relation, being a place which was more sensible even in terms of security and safety. Since Rome, it's the international hub of Italy. You have to consider it's 50 million passengers each year. So obviously, before rolling out software, we have to be 100% sure that the solution is fully compliant.
Mm-hmm. And we're definitely going to talk about that. You mentioned that 80% of your work is the regs and compliance side of things. So we'd love to talk about that and the business needs and also the business mentors. But we're going to put that over to the side for a second to go back to the KPIs piece that you're talking about, because you mentioned 2 core real KPIs that you're focusing on. From the user side, it is the time in the airport. And I'll talk about, and I know that probably pops up in your mind why that's so important, but I'm going to add a little bit to this, is the time in the airport. And then also for these startups, it is this test-to-rollout. So you mentioned earlier about when you started and you brought in the shopping mall element and that aspect into the mall. that really, if you're looking at the time that person spends in the airport, 1-2 hours, whatever that number is, and they're coming into the airport, you have them essentially captive for that period of time where they want to get to that flight. Just 96% are asking, where's my flight? Is it going to be delayed? How do I get there? That's what customers are focused on. But when they enter that airport, from then until the time they get on that plane, you have them and you have the opportunity to sell them the things that they need, provide value add services that give them a good experience, and a host of other things. The way that you guys have visualized that and really focused on the key here, insight, is that data, being able to see the traffic, the analytics, and have the data that you can report to your startups is extremely valuable. But then capitalizing on each piece, because you have your vendors in there who are selling, they're paying for that space. The products that are being sold, you're getting revenue off that. The startups, the services they're providing, and everything of that nature, the airports and the airlines themselves, all working together to give that person a good experience and maximize that period of time. So tell us a little bit about that, how you guys are collecting all that data in the best way that you can, and how you're deriving insights and really focusing only on those things that really matter within your space.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, the major challenge of airports is that we don't own the data of the customers, right? Because the customers belongs to the airline. So the CRM, it's owned by United or American Airlines or ITA or Lufthansa or whatever. So we only have the data of the boarding passes when they do buy something. And that's why when you buy something, you have to scan it, because you have to see if you have to pay VAT or not, if you have to pay taxes or not and stuff. But even in that sense, if you are, let's say that you are traveling from Rome to Egypt, we assume that if you are traveling to Egypt, you are Egyptian, right? Because we do not have the personal data of that person. We only know destination. So if you're going to Canada, we assume that you are a Canadian, but you can be a tourist born and raised in Rome. Starting from this major challenge, we have to mix this amount of data with the experience and with the behavior of passengers inside the infrastructure. So if we play well on the customer experience, on tools such as virtual assistant and all the related assets that you can actually have alongside with the time that you spend inside the airport, then we can leverage on having some details, some personal contact, email, cell phone, to actually start a conversation. And in our case, we have an additional challenge that Rome is an incoming leisure city. So we usually see grandmothers, then the nephews, then their sons and stuff, right? Because everyone wants to go to Rome once in a lifetime, right? So you don't have so many frequent traveler businesses, right? Because Rome, it's a pretty touristic place. It's not like Frankfurt or Milan. Those cities that have a strong component of business traveler. And obviously, in that sense, if you have a frequent flyer, it's much more, it is easier to get in touch because they actually get to the infrastructure much more during the year. So in that sense, we actually developed a way of mixing all those data sets with the right task and with the right timing in terms of I track someone that comes into the infrastructure. I know where the actual doing their check-in. I know where they are actually moving, if in a lounge or if in a restaurant or in a luxury shopping mall. And from there, I can actually build up the possibility of showing on the screen instead of giving them the actual info on the flight. I'm going to share a QR code that actually pops up to a chatbot or to an assistant that from then on, I can actually have a conversation with the client on the medium and longer term. So in this sense, it's important that we actually leverage the opportunity of time spent inside the infrastructure to give them the opportunity of customized info for them in a very digital and only way that obviously is not comparable to the simple boarding pass and the relationship that they have with the airline. So to give you a couple of examples, if you are traveling to a gate that is next to a restaurant, I'm going to pop up a promo code to actually have dinner there or share it with your friends. So the ability of mixing those data comes from the fact that we actually discovered during the months and years that some shops, example, luxury shop, they do most of their revenue only with some flights. So why spending advertising on time slots that they are not appealing enough for this target? So to customize all these relation and experiences for passengers, that allows us to actually have a much wider view of services and of information to those passengers, which starts from a challenge that obviously, and once again, we do not own those data. So we need to merge technologies such as LiDAR, such as AI applied to, as well, triggered with computer vision. So different technology that can actually help us out in mixing those data set and having a unique experience for Rome that then actually led to prizes such as best customer experience in Dora. Why? Because we actually get those data and we actually start from the passenger needs and we reverse engineering from their needs much more than just say as a corporate, those are our maps because well, and our brand is that. So you have to discover how from those maps, right? Instead, starting from their actual needs, that obviously is the aim that actually fuels even the accelerator program.
So going from having the challenge, the initial challenge that you mentioned, the data collection, and going through that entire process so that you can get down to those numbers that matter and stay, the term you use, delivery driven, because every startup is delivery driven. They have to be milestones, they have to be roadmaps and things that they must meet to live and succeed. And a lot of corporations, once they get so big, it's, hey, we'll do that next week. Don't really worry. It's, it'll happen. Don't worry about it. Yep. The expansion of time just continues and continues. But you've brought in an effective model to make sure that you stay delivery driven as a team. And I want to go into the other statistic here that you look at, or the other KPI, and that's the tests to full rollouts. So that's what stuck out in my mind in our first conversation is if you have 50% of those tests are moving to full rollouts, that is a great statistic. That's a great number for any type of investment that can occur. So let's talk about that. And then also going from, to begin at the top of that funnel, in essence, would be those 500 to 600 that you're seeing into the 10 and 15 that you're investing in. Let's say it's 1 out of 40, if it's 15 out of 600. And then how you're getting them to that 50% test as full rollout. And I want to add one thing that we talked about is that you also look for, and you mentioned this in the chatbot example, that you look for very specific solution examples. Hey, I need a really good chatbot that can solve for these 96% of inquiries. And you guys will be really good at this. And then we'll figure out how you can grow from there first, rather than, hey, we want a single thing to do everything. And now we have this one single startup that we're putting all our chips into.
Exactly. Starting from the funnel in terms of numbers, and then I'm going to move with the KPIs and actually how we actually define and lead to the 50%. So as I was saying, roughly each year we get from 500 startups, roughly 600 to 700 proposal, even 800 last year. Why? Because a startup can apply even to different cases. If you have a computer vision, you can apply to queuing, but even to, I don't know, shopping, right? So from those 500 projects, we actually go through them with the business. So with the people that will actually gonna mentor them in the future, because they're gonna not be printers since the very beginning. Because starting from the case, then we're gonna move to a first list. From those 500, we're gonna drill down to roughly 250 projects. From those, we're gonna fine tune them with business needs. So to actually seeing if the value case around those projects is actually something that we see in terms of costs, in terms of how we actually manage them. Talking about queuing once again, or cleaning robots, what's the expenses rate and what's actually the expectation in that sense. And then we actually move to a pitch week, which we used to call pitch days, but then we actually realized that the numbers were so high. We had to move to an entire pitch week, which we see roughly 160, 170 projects. So we go through 25 to 30 pitch each day. Obviously, pitches of 7-8 minutes with additional 7-8 minutes of questions from the business. Once again, because all this process is managed by innovation purchasing team, but even the innovation cabin crew in terms of business needs. So all the colleagues that then once again, it's going to be the mentors of those projects. From those, we actually drill down to roughly 50. so 150, and we present them to the internal committee, which is technology and innovation committee, where the actual potential mentors of those solutions then expose the value case that can be delivered with those startups. And at the end, we actually select 10, 15 of them. Obviously, the selection, it's even based on a first assessment on the people, on the company, because once again, we want to start knowing if they are going through an investment round, in what round they are in, which are the investors, if they ever worked with airports, if they had the problems in the past with other companies. So we assess them even in a much wider way. So by selecting those 10, 15, for example, this year we have 12, then we start working with them. The first 2 months we actually spent with defining the case, which we call the setup phase, which it's 1 to 2 months. So we actually say, okay, that's the theory of your solution, your AI applied to turnarounds for planes. Okay, let's see how it actually works here. Let's see how we can actually a concrete case accordingly to the type of cameras that we have, the cybersecurity constraints that we have, and such. And then we move to the delivery phase. So we actually then have those solutions live, both if it's a software or if it's a hardware. And then we actually define from the set phase even the KPIs that we expect to meet during the delivery phase. So in this sense, once again, this POC, it's the very first step to the rollout. So how we can actually guarantee the success rate being so high, close to 50%, it's because we actually start since the very beginning from the business needs with the business mentors, right? And we start working with them. We already know that they need that solution. The only thing that we have to make sure it's the quality of the delivery that the startup can provide. So if the expectation of the KPIs that we said they are met, obviously we actually have a fast track when it comes to decision making, because you already have on board the business, you already have on board the issue that you already tracked, but at the same time, you already know the team which already has the solution in place inside the airport. So if they have to estimate even the costs of the rollout, they already know that to install 3 LiDAR sensor in this area, it costed that amount of money. So they already have a clear overview of what's the amount of work, time, and money to actually have it as a rollout. So the key is not to actually stop on the issue. So not to be in love with the technology, but to be in love with the problem that you actually have to solve. So if you start from the problem and you actually go back to the technology that can allow you to actually solve it, then it's much easier to be on a meeting when you have to justify an investment in that stand. Because along your side, you already have the business since the very beginning, since the selection there 8 months ago. So they already know the founder, they already know the cost-effective solution. Even from the ICT side, they don't discover this project at the end. They are engaged since the setup phase. So they already know the solution and the technology. And obviously, those small groups actually allow us to be much more quick and much more contextualized on the requirements that we have in terms of company. And obviously, being on different topics, on different issues that we track every year with our plan. So every year we have different issue and different topics. And obviously, if we keep on updating our needs and our requirements, and the code that we do along the years are perfectly matched with those needs, obviously for us, it's going to be easier to get something that is not in the world of theory, but it's in the world of practical solutions.
And what's great is that so you as the customer at the very top are defining your business needs with the business mentors. And so that way, when those 500 to 600 apply or come into the top of the funnel, we'll call it the input phase, they can generate those 800 proposals based on things that you as the customer are saying, this is exactly what I need solved. So it removes all the ambiguity, because a lot of times when founders start companies, they go, I think this market has this problem, or I have this problem and I think that it should be solved, or I've seen this, and they don't know the true market, the true value, and all those kind of things of that solution until they really get out and test. But you've just brought all the problems straight up forward. Talk about the defining of that as you're looking forward with those business mentors, defining the business needs and identifying the problems. Even let's say you said the top rated airport 8 years in a row. How do you continue to find those compelling, because you have to continuously improve to do that. So how do you continuously define the next level and the next level and the next level as a team?
The key takeaway here is not to have this conversation only approach, but to obviously and constantly being in touch with the business in terms of who does the actual activity. So the operational side has to be involved even more than the management side, because the single requirements and the single needs starts from the bottom. So bottom up, it's the approach when it comes to tracking needs, because if you only focus on the management side and on the middle management, obviously they have a wider view of the processes, how they manage them, all the KPIs and the activities, but most of the times is only the guy or the girl that actually is involved directly in their activity knows all the pain points and all the optimization that can be done on that single process. So if the transformation for the company or the digitalization of those processes are only thought shared with the management side, you are missing out a lot of the case. Let's say the majority of the optimization comes from all the people involved in this infrastructure. Obviously, when it comes to an airport, there are lots of stakeholders involved during the process. So from the airlines to the handlers, but even to the brand that actually manages all the shops. So if you only talk, just to give you the example on the retail, on the accounting side, so the accounts of the, I don't know, fashion retail, right? Those, I don't know, 7 shops that do those things. Their view, it's on the inventory, it's on the payments, it's on the overall process. But you don't really know how long it takes from the guy that works inside the shop to get the purse inside their backend, because you never had to do it. So maybe the automation or the optimization of those data and sets, you are talking to the wrong guy. They don't even know because it's not their own task. So here, the takeaway, it's every year to actually focus much more on the colleagues as a horizontal approach, because you don't want to build a company inside a company, because innovation becomes the elite on the ivory tower, then the risk is to only have the strategic thinking around topics, but then you miss out on the actual hands-on approach on whoever does a single task. So I think that is something that we are always very focused on.
So you said it's an annual review kind of thing, or is there constant communication that's feeding up? And how, because that really speaks to, and the successes have validated that and demonstrated it, is this collaboration and communication culture that's from the bottom up. You mentioned the horizontal. What are the steps and the procedures that you've taken to build that kind of environment so that the person who's directly hands-on with the problem in the shop or in the service or in the flow of the customer every day, that they're able to feed that information up and that it's filtered through in the proper way so that the top hears it, the middle hears it, and there's that collaborative, open approach to problem solving and solutions?
Yes, since we started, we actually had in mind that we wanted to avoid this company inside the companies. When we defined the group of people, innovation cabin crew, it was actually not to have not only a decision maker or a future mentor of the cases, but to be the megaphone of mindset and of the ideas and projects that can come from their own area. So that's why the innovation represents not only the business unit of the company, but even on all the controlled ones, security, cleaning, all the different assets. And since the very first day, they have trained with a specific focus and a specific management path on innovation and on startups, because they have to have the toolbox to be able to talk to a founder, which is very different from talking to your peers or talking to other companies, right? But they have to keep in mind that they always have to know that their role, the majority of their role, to get their ears out on cases and on issues. We do have a review annually, but in every single meeting, if we hear something that rises in terms of cases, from bird strike to cleaning or to a feedback that we got from a single passenger that said, oh, it's not clear how to go to the rental car service. So the mapping is not really precise because you change level, you are in a side area, so GPS is not the way. So the mapping of those needs has to be an always on approach. The yearly review, it's helpful because it gives you like the strategic path on which are the main area, like Internet of Things or predictive maintenance. But you want to focus on, we have problems with the escalator on Terminal 3 because the temperature rises in June. So we have to focus on that one because the sun hits that single thing, right? So you have to be meticulous in that sense, because at the end of the day, you get the commitment from the overall company when it comes to innovation. If every single employee sees the reliability and the results from those projects in their own activity, in their own daily job. Because if not, you're going to just see the innovation gurus that they talk about the future. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You are not working for them. So you are there to work for them. It's not that they are working for you. You are the one that you actually have to focus on their needs every single day.
With the business unit level across the different assets, you mentioned security and what have you, defining the incentive and the career advancement around innovation, not just satisfaction and maintenance of what is working. That's, of course, the baseline. But then the real growth comes from each person being an innovator and working collaboratively with the rest.
And when each person becomes an innovator, then the company is truly moving to an innovation strategy. You know what I mean? It's not about the slides. It's not about like the conference that you actually stated. If every one of us actually focuses, oh, I have this idea, I should share it with my colleagues from the innovation cabin crew, that then it's going to map it to the next call and we're going to find a startup or a technology that's going to address this issue. And then it's even the commitment coming from all the company.
Now let's go over to the reg compliance and then the business leads and business mentors. I have a further question just about those business mentors. And then I would love to get into that regulatory compliance part, which you said is 80% of the business. Talk more about the sourcing and the selection of these business mentors, and they operate within the business, and then also they work with the startups. So each startup has a specific assigned business mentor. Talk a little bit more about those people.
Yeah, so they, let's say 20% of their time they actually dedicated to the startups and to the innovation project. Why? Because they have to keep their foot inside the business, because detach them from their job or from the real world, the issue that we're going to address is not going to be helpful for the startup. So the startup wants to have a business mentor that actually has the skin in the game and knows what's around the area or she works, but at the same time has the possibility of leading this group of people by delivering this solution and this technology. How we actually define them, obviously with HR, we define the personas in terms of type of, but we do know and we do believe that innovation, it's a mindset. It's not a matter of age. It's not a matter of what kind of job you do. It's a matter of what kind of contribution you can share to the cases and to the company itself. So in that sense, we define 30 people each time. The cycle ends every 3 years. And the last year, it's actually in parallel with the new cycle. And why? Because they have to share the knowledge and all the takeaways from the old cycle to the new one. Then, as I was saying, they have a managerial path and a training course dedicated to innovation. And at the end of the year, they have a reward based on the project they actually worked on. So obviously, the reward is not a number which is in proportion if the startup went to a rollout or not. It's just a matter of if you had the possibility of leading. Since we have 30 mentors, it can happen that during the year you are not the actual mentors because we didn't focus on your topic, on your solution. So it can be that 1 year you are not a mentor, but the next year you are. So obviously this amount of money will be defined in this sense, because the commitment must be defined even in this plans. In terms of moving along to different cycles, obviously now we are opening up even the new cycles for the innovation cabin crew, even to young talent and people that comes from the operation side. Why? Because once again, we didn't want to have only middle management managers only because they know the process. We want to contaminate them even with some bottom up coming, okay, I just got here, but I have a very different perspective in this issue. So we really want to have this type of conversation inside the group of people. So that's why we want to obviously have this bar raised, to raise the bar in terms of quality, but even in terms of conversation when it comes to technology and cases, because we have to force ourselves to think outside the box. So not to only address needs or issues with technology, because sometimes solution can be on the process side. So it's the process that is not working, and it's not the technology behind it. For example, we had lots of beacons. We never used the data around it. So the problem wasn't the beacons in terms of Bluetooth, was more the process. Okay, but what we can do with those data, what we can actually leverage in terms of business. So once again, we don't have to be static and see something in one single way, but force ourselves to have this innovation mindset by seeing things from different point of view.
Very good. And one thing to highlight there is that we talked about the growth and incentives that are aligned for the person innovating, but then you're allocating the bonus to leadership and allowing, and not specifically tying it to success of a rollout, because then everyone becomes attached to achieving that success, versus allocating the bonus to leaders who are stepping up and leading on projects, because you're allowing failure, saying, hey, we're going to go out and try. We know that 50% are going to fail. I just want you to get out and lead.
Exactly. That's why I appreciate much more my colleagues that said, you know what? They are not good. We shouldn't proceed with them. I embrace much more a negative feedback because we need and we learned from failures much more than just say, okay, we were right. Let's do the rollout because that's the technology that we needed. It's important in saying, you know what? We tested. It's not working. It's not what we needed. So instead of wasting money, we failed fast on a 20K framework instead of failing on millions. So I appreciate much more that kind of feedbacks, because once again, it's always more difficult to say no than to say yes. So that's the thing.
Powerful insight there. And yeah, I actually didn't think about it that way too, is that if you do incentivize specifically on success, then that person is going to be desiring to push something through that might not be the best thing for the business.
Exactly, because they're going to push us. Hey, I am the mentor, so I have to push to actually make it happen. No, we need to stop as soon as possible. That's the value that we have to have from you.
Very good stuff. So there's two pieces there that spawn off that, and just the general conversation. It's talking something about the specific vision and the technologies, some of the examples that you've had where it's really created a big improvement in the customer's life. I also have over here on regulatory compliance, which we wanted to touch on. Regulatory compliance, talk about how you are interpreting the regulations as they come along, and then filtering out technologies and choosing technologies that are within those regulations. And why is that 80% of the business, or a heavy amount of the business?
Yeah, the real difference by having an innovation team that actually delivers projects and versus innovation teams that deliver tests just with the aim of being a test inside an environment that is protected, closed, and what else, is obviously to have, since the very first day, compliance in terms of legal and risk in place with the same working group. So the working group that we actually start during the setup phase, it's already with those stakeholders in the project. So we don't involve them afterwards, or we don't involve them only if we have an issue. We involve them in any case, because we need to know, first of all, what's the assessment of the current law and the regulation that is in place inside the airport. But at the same time, we have to understand what's the leverage between what we can do now and what we want to do afterwards. So to give you a couple of examples, our insurance broker actually discovered that our solution were already covered by our insurance in terms of price. The only thing that we had to do was to make them aware of the single cases, so the risk attached to any single cases, and with the machines and with the robots to add an additional insurance provided by the startups, and at the same time to define all the risks related to those machines. And for risks, I say kids playing around with a robot that is 150 kilos, so it can tip over and stuff. So we have to work much more on the potential risks and compliance of those solutions. Because I always say, to have a robot shipped in Rome is the easiest part. That's the day one of the project. It's not the ending. It's not where you have the robot. It's when the service live up and running where you actually start the test. What all the project and all the work that is in between those phases is actually the reason why of the 700 startup applying to Rome. Because I always say our salesmen are the people that took part of the program the year before and the year before. Because only the feedbacks that they get from the work and from the project that they got from the company, it's the best way of selling the reason why of applying to our program. And most of them, 80% of them, roughly, because I always read them, they send email on social and stuff. We were amazed by the fact that they didn't care about testing. They cared about moving this test in a compliant and standardized way to be a service inside an airport, an international airport. But the assessment is not only on the law, it's even on the materials. We checked all the single specs, if it's based on wood, if it's based on metal, if it has a CA certification or not, which you don't even care if it was just a test. So usually, if it's just a test, everyone will say, even if the chair made out of wood in some parts, we don't care because it's going to be the test, right? Instead, we need to assess that robot, that solution for the rollout, much more than for the test. So that brings a challenge to the company, much different from just focus on the testing phase. No, we as a working group leverage for the rollout, much more than just for.
And that's a great thing, because I didn't immediately connect those dots, because in my mind, just like how many approach it, regulatory and compliance kind of comes later. They bring in the startups, they bring in the tech. Oh, this is amazing. They're excited by the team or the pitch or what that technology is. Like, connect to that point, being in love with the technology versus being in love with the problem. And if you're involving regulatory compliance right away, and I would say two pieces that I picked up from the way you're explaining this when you approach it, it's intense rigor across the entire process. It's not, let's do it later. It's, let's be rigorous all the way throughout. And then it's intense curiosity as well. Curiosity about, what is it made of? Where does it come from? How is it sourced? How is it produced? What's it going to look like here? How's it going to function? All those kind of things are being thought out early and tested. That testing mind is a strong force. So that's a key insight for a lot of investors or founders. Bring in regulatory compliance, bring it as part of that evaluation and assessment process.
As a key stakeholder of the project, not just something that I'm going to assess after I actually have the chip, because then it's the most frustrating things from the startup, right? So that's why we have to have a startup-driven program, because think about the start. I invested time, money, and effort on having this machine, but then the test even worked, right? But right afterwards, I'm going to say, oh, but yeah, but I assessed with my legal, with my fire prevention colleagues, and simply the machine is not compliant. So sorry, even if we do love your solution, is not compliant. You just wasted 6 months of your, you know what I mean? That's one of the thing why startups, when they deal with corporates, they want to be 100% sure who they are talking to, if they're reliable enough, because I take the point, why should I waste time? And most of the times it comes like that from even on the venture side. It's not just for the money. Most of the times you want to have knowledge. You want to have door opening on other businesses. You want to have people that have a good agenda and they are reliable. They're going to say, oh, if I get introduced by Giulio, I know that it's something that's going to happen. It's not just a mail because I asked, right? So if I'm going to join this program, I know that I'm not going to waste time, because if I send an email after 1 day, 2 days maximum, someone is going to reply, someone it's on it. They're going to deal it in English. They know about the software. They have the knowledge. You know what I mean? Like, when you talk to corporates, you don't have to think about things that you can't be sure about, right? Most of the time, I'm working with this multinational company. Okay, but you are working on a branch of 10 people. Then maybe they are not engaged enough on this solution. So don't just see the overall brand. You have to see the actual working group that they are delivering this solution. If they have the endorsement and if they have the way of doing those projects in a much more horizontal way to be compliant for the future rollout, because that's the goal that you have, that your solution work. Because why you apply, be sure and show that actually works. But at the end, you want to aim and you want to push with this for this commercial service, right? And to push for them, if you help me out in the compliance side, then if I have to move to Munich to propose to London or both airport, hospital or other scale, I already have all this job done by saying, you know what, Rome already did that. So I know that the legal side is that, the compliance is that one, the European framework says that this, so we had to leverage on that skill. So you already provide them a whole set of information that for them are truly valuable. And that's why every year we scale up in terms of numbers, because simply we are actually focusing on what the startup wants, but at the same time focusing on the needs that we have as a corporate.
And then to talk two quick quotes here that emerged in my mind is that you said the result is in the experience of the customer, not just the delivery of the product. You can get a robot, but what is that robot really going to do ultimately for the customer, for the experience of the airport?
Yeah, okay, you get a robot, but what's the amount of sales that is gonna add to my balance sheet, right? I like the fancy thing, which obviously on the marketing and communication side, it is a value to have the selfie with the logo and stuff. But at the end, if you want to roll out with a commercial service, I don't know, like 100K a year, I want to make sure with concrete numbers that if I spend 100, I'm going to have, I don't know, 120, 150. I'm going to have a true value for money project that actually makes sense in a much wider way. Why? Because even from the startup point of view, when you're going to sell it to another player, you already have a business case done, not on the fact that you want to have a fancy nerdy robot around the peers, but you want to have that brings you additional value. So in our case, attracts additional sales, because there are lots of people, even me, that I get bored when I'm in line. So I don't want to be in line for 10 minutes just for a Coke. Most of the times I'm just going to avoid to actually buy one, right? But instead, if I'm sitting down doing other things and I can just point on a website and in a certain amount of time, so under 5 minutes, that robot is going to come with a cold drink that I actually want, my $5 are there, which I didn't want to spend. So that's the aim. More, it's not focusing once again on the technology, but let's focus on the issue of people being that they don't want to be in line, and obviously having 150,000 passenger, it's impossible to have an infrastructure without any lineup in any service or in any restaurant, right? So taking away that utopia, then you have to focus on the alternatives and on the support that you can have in terms of
Exactly. And that hits right on the second quote. Love the problem.
Exactly.
Love the problem that you're going to solve, and then be creative in the way that you solve it. So a couple more questions here. One is around some specific tech examples or product examples and customer experience improvement examples that you've seen over your time with the airport that have come in and drastically improved that customer experience. Was it the robots that delivered drinks, or what was it where you actually got customers that said, this is amazing? Or maybe it was something in the back end that your team said, oh, this is the biggest positive change.
I would say to start talking to the passenger directly with the device that you have in your pocket. So to have an assistant that can actually fulfill all the requirements in terms of infos, in terms of book table, by perfume. So to have an assistant that will avoid you to be staring at those monitors every single time, which for us is not something that we really want to have all around the airport. I think that the direct conversation, the airport to the actual passenger, it's something that could be, and it is, a game changer, because usually passengers, when it comes to seeking for services in a much wider sense, talking about even seniors, so washrooms and stuff, it's something that it wasn't scalable to keep it as go to the info point. In a digital world, we need to have all our information, all our assets inside that conversation that has to be smart enough. So obviously powered with AI as well. So Gen AI in this case, that can actually fulfill something that it's even on and off airport. So not just the information inside the infrastructure, but even to book a taxi. If I lose something on a cab, if you wanna give me some suggestions from the restaurants, the airport being a consultancy player of your trip, much more than just the infrastructure where you actually touch base only to take a flight. So this way of relating to the customer is enhancing the experience. It's in such a unique way.
Amazing. And the next question is more around the future vision that you have as you're looking forward into the next 5-10 years. How is our experience with airports or travel going to be changing?
I think that this industry is facing major challenges. First of all, in terms of mainstream tourism, that is growing, which is a good thing for the numbers and even for the growing of the industry as well. But there are some pain points, right? For example, south of Europe, from June to September, it's basically in some days impossible to work on April on the runways. So automation will become a necessity. We cannot think about the airport of the future with labor side being forced to be on working hours in those climate, in those temperature, which is not simply scalable enough for the volume that we're going to have. Then in addition, obviously, to be much more aware of the impact that we have in terms of emissions on the territory and on the fuels. It's not to always market Rome. We did open funnel right next to one of the runways, so the airport will be fully green in terms of emission by 2030. So I think that the challenges behind the fact that aviation is impacting this planet, we need to be aware of that. And even if we are a small portion of the problem, we need to be aware of that, and we need to push in terms of sustainability, in terms of different fueling for the aircraft, but even to be aware to the passenger of this changing in terms of climate. So I think that once again, automation and be aware of sustainable fueling, I think are main topics that we should address, not only as a single hub, but as an industry much more, right? And in a world of main challenges, I think that those ones are some that we have to address as an industry once again.
Awesome. Great view on that. Autonomous mobility and sustainability. Now, I want to ask actually two more questions just around, one is more maybe a multi-part question, but just to talk about that funnel. You have your input 5 to 600. A lot of that input of those companies comes from the previous companies that were involved because they're your success story. They become your marketer. Hey, we had success with this airport. We had this great experience. Then you said there's about 800 proposals that go into 150 to 160 pitches. What are the strongest filters that you're applying there? Is it maturity of the startup that is the strongest filter from that 800 to 150? And if you could really just detail from the whole funnel some of the other perspectives from the 150 and down, each filter that is most heavily applied in the mindset and the way that you've applied that single KPI, what is the KPI at each, or the strongest filter at each step of that funnel?
So from the very first step of the funnel, so when we actually lower it down, 60% of them, 70% of them, in reality, the strongest filters comes from the solution itself and the business case around it. So let's say it's much more, let's say, a macro approach on the technology and on the solution. Why? Because most of them we already know in the past that we actually tested and they're not going to work, especially when it comes to technology. Turning back to the example on GPS when it comes to indoor location, lots of proposal, but simply it's not a technology that actually works. So most of the decision in that phase are taking with this scenario, with these KPIs. Then there are the next gateway, which is much more in details. It's related to the one that actually moved to the, let's say, if they're gonna have a pitch. So if they actually gonna pitch to the mentors and to the companies as well. It's related to the solution itself, to the maturity, obviously, because we simply cannot, being an airport, test something in the framework of the ideas. We need something that is already in place. The robot, the software, it's not a matter of R&D. It's a matter of we need to test it. So it has to be real. And at the same time, even if you have partners or cases that you already deployed in an environment close to ours, so it could be shopping malls, airport, ports, all the infrastructure side, obviously, and then it's another strong mix. Then when you pitch, how we actually select, team plays a key role. That's why we always strongly suggest to be present in the hub where we do the pitches, because we even get the sense and the feeling of the pitch itself. Obviously, if you are in North America or in Asia, it's not worthwhile to have all flights, but to do a bit of a background check in terms of CV, in terms of if the founder, the tech guy that actually manages and knows about the robot, if the software is developed by a team, track record is senior enough to be a stable software and stuff. That is one of the key takeaways when it comes to the actual selection phase. Then doing the POC, there is the additional layer of the potential investment by the venture arm, so ADR Ventures. And that from the 10 to 15 that we select, only a few of them are actually appealing enough from the firm. And obviously the CVC looks at the scalability, but even looks at the potential when it comes to in which phase they are in, right? If they are in an actual round, if they're already closed, what kind of deal we can actually have and related discount if we join, because once again, those startups, they are really around the money. After 6 to 8 months, they're going to say, we truly believe that you guys can help us out in growing. And when we see that kind of conversation in terms of some mutual takeaway by this investment, most of the times that's the right way of proceeding, and then to actually sign a safe note most of the times. But that's the, let's say, funnel a bit more down and
Fantastic. And thank you for providing that insight. I didn't want to take any of those for granted. I want to get your answers so that investors or corporate venture capitalists or even founders who are going to go through that process really know how you guys select, because it's clearly a very successful initiative that you guys have running. So final question here. What is one action step that investors and founders can take after having listened to this to improve their business or their investment firm?
From the corporate point of view, never took for granted to actually have knowledge around your technology, because in a world that changes so much in terms of solution, but even on the environments, never actually take for granted that that at corporate level there is the full knowledge of the solution itself. Because most of the time you pitch something and it can be that the manager or whoever you are pitching to, if he or she is not aware of the technology, it's more a matter of being scared of allowing a test on something that they don't understand. And you want to avoid in that phase, because you want to make it as simple as you can to actually being able to define the clear takeaway for their company, much more than just being in love with your technology. You should focus much more on, if I were them, what I am actually I would like to hear in terms of enhancing the way I deal with those issues. Because in a time where middle management saw in the last 30 years such a wide change of technologies and a wide change of way they actually can manage data, can manage experience with clients and with passengers in our sense, they're usually bombarded by different point of view on the same text. So you always have to keep in mind that the more you can actually get them on board, the better it is.
Fantastic. And then for founders, is it the same kind of thing? Is that don't take it for granted?
For founders, I will always focus on the reliability of the people you are talking to, because at the end of the day, it's a business of people in any sense. So it's never a relation in corporates. It's all relation between people. So the reliability of people, it's the clear asset when it comes to deals in general.
Well, Giulio, thank you for being on the show. It's been extremely valuable, probably one of our best shows ever when it comes to just real concrete information that people can put into use. So thank you for bringing everything you brought today to the show.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Talk to you again soon. Thanks. Hey everyone, thank you for watching this episode of Titans Up today. What did you learn from it? Make sure to drop a comment below with your most valuable insight so that other people can engage in the conversation around what this speaker brought to the table. And then on another front, make sure to subscribe so that every time we drop a new episode, you will be notified. And that way you can keep fueling your dreams and your brain with fresh insights which can help you along your journey and along your path to your goals. So thank you so much again, and I look forward to seeing you in the next interview.